Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR, that I'm Blair Kirchhoff. The NFL Draft is a couple weeks away, and beat writer Pete Sweeney joins us to describe how some recent developments could have an impact on the Chiefs' direction when they're on the clock. Also, the Star will post its latest mock draft this week. We'll tell you what goes into our decision-making when it comes to the Chiefs' 9 selections. After a break, you'll hear from the most accomplished soccer player this area has ever produced. Matt Besler, who grew up in Overland Park, spent 12 of his 13 MLS seasons with Sporting KC, and in 2014 he started all 4 games for the U.S. in the World Cup. He stopped by our studio and described his World Cup experience and shared his thoughts on Kansas City's readiness as a host for games and base camps at the World Cup this summer. After a break, I'll have some final thoughts and tell you what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. Hey, Pete.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. So a couple things happened last week, and you wrote about them. I wanted to get your thoughts on how this may impact the Chiefs during the draft. The first involves Rashee Rice. And over the weekend, Rice wasn't suspended following accusations of domestic violence by the mother of his 2 kids. She'd posted the allegations on social media in January and filed a lawsuit the next month. The NFL said it wouldn't suspend Rice over it. And in a statement to us, the league said there was insufficient evidence. So, bad behavior by Rashee Rice. Won't be suspended by the NFL. What do we think about that? Do we expect the Chiefs to take some kind of action here that the NFL didn't?
We've seen historically the Chiefs in these situations follow the NFL's lead. This is a league that has off the field problems with every team. And it seems like to an extent, every team handles it differently. The only outlier in that actually happened while we were both covering the Chiefs, Blair, back in the day with Kareem Hunt. And it seemed like the team only took action because Kareem Hunt was not honest with them with some of the off the field matters. Later on, months later, it came out that in some capacity, he had not been truthful to Andy Reid. He had not been truthful to the ownership. And it was really swift action where they chose to move on from a player. Right now, all we know is that the NFL looked into this. I think it is worth saying that the initial report came from ESPN's Adam Schefter, which a lot of people usually point to. This is the player side. This is the agent side. His language was that he had not engaged in conduct that violates the personal conduct policy and that the accusations and the investigation was now closed. We reached out to the league, and it just is a little thing to note within the language that their language was there was insufficient evidence to support a finding that Rice violated the personal conduct policy. And so that to me is a little bit of a clarification in my estimation, and not to dig too into it because there's a lot we don't know, but the league didn't want to say definitively some of these accusations he didn't do. More or less, the league said we couldn't find anything to prove this. And so they decided to not deal Rice a league suspension, any kind of penalty. And I think a key part of this was at this time. I mean, if somehow, as this plays out in the court of law, some of the other off the field matters, and it continues to play through, maybe if more evidence came to the table, the league would take a different stance. They'd have a different decision. But right now, I think the Chiefs will take the investigation for what it's worth, and I don't anticipate, based on history, that the Chiefs take any action.
So has anything about this influenced you or your thinking when it comes to the mock drafts that you and I do each week? There will be a 4th mock draft dropping in the Star on kansascity.com and in the Star's print editions this week. I know at least one of them, in at least one case, we selected a wide receiver with the Chiefs' first pick at number 9, Cornell Tate from Ohio State. And heads up, there may be another wide receiver selected by the Chiefs in a future, close to the future mock draft. So, what do you think about that? Could Rice's kind little bit of uncertainty have anything to do with the Chiefs' thinking when it comes to drafting a wide receiver early?
Quite honestly, I don't think it changes much. I mean, they have a lot of needs, so you could say I think one stance on it would be, well, they'll definitely have Rice at the beginning of this year if you want to go that way, and maybe there's other greater needs then. We've noted that edge rusher and cornerback are also in play within the 2 picks in the first round. But I think if you were considering a receiver anyway, I don't think this changes much, especially with the top pick. We saw Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts get 4 years for $84 million guaranteed. I think a lot of people in the NFL, including probably us two, Blair, would say he's a number 2 receiver, not even a number 1. And so this position is getting more and more expensive. Hollywood Brown left the Chiefs to go to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Chiefs did bring back Tyquan Thornton, but there's still a need there. And in the case of Rashee Rice, I think you're looking at 3 parts of this. You know, can he be available, both injury and otherwise? Is he off the field there? And if both are there, are you still wanting to take somewhat of a risk, right? With now 2 incidents of him not being available due to suspension. You know, I think he has to have the production here this year, the final year of his rookie contract. And I think it needs to come with at least a vote of confidence that you are going to be able to trust this player, both injury and with some of the off the field matters, to stay on the field. If there's any doubt, I don't know if you're trying to pay that amount of money for what it would cost to take a healthy, well-behaved, productive Rice. And what taking a receiver in the first round does is, let's say you do take a Carnell Tate, let's say you take a Jordan Tyson and Kaiir Elam, and they match their draft standing. They have an outstanding rookie season. We've seen that recently with plenty of rookies in the NFL where they're able to hit the ground running. Now there's not as much pressure on you to give Rice a big payday when you may have other positions to commit other sums of money to and stay within the salary cap. So even if you're assuming, okay, this is dead and buried with Rice, he's going to play the full season, he's going to be healthy, we're going to feel a lot better about him next offseason. I think you still need to add receiver talent to the room. And a subplot of this too, Blair, is you're likely about to lose Travis Kelce's production for 2027. We know he's going to play in 2026, the way the contract is built, more than likely his final year. And so you, bottom line, need to continue to, again, shovel coal into the radiator. You need to give Patrick Mahomes weapons if he's going to succeed, and I think a wide receiver would do that.
Beat writer Pete Sweeney is breaking it down for us. Okay, Pete, how about the other position or the other piece of news last week? And it comes from the cornerback position. The Chiefs signed Kaiir Elam. We remember him as a first-round pick of the 22 draft of the Buffalo Bills, taking 2 spots behind Trent McDuffie, who the Chiefs traded up to get so they could get ahead of the Bills. We thought the Bills were interested in McDuffie. He turns out the Bills probably were, as we find out later, right, with a documentary. But what are the Chiefs getting in Kaiir Elam, who really hasn't lived up to his first-round status?
Yeah, this is the definition, Blair, of what we call the Brett Veach special, which is a former first or second round pick, typically, that didn't work out in his first destination. Brett Veach and the personnel staff presumably keep their notes handy from those draft classes, and they go back and say, what did we think of this player coming out? Were we considering taking him in that draft? How did we feel before he was touched by any NFL coach, worked with any NFL team? And they say, okay, let's take a small bet, a low risk bet on our coaching staff. And they actually have pretty good defensive backs coach in Dave Merritt. I think if you're handing any lottery ticket type of player to a positional coach on the Chiefs, I wouldn't bet against a defensive backs coach. I truly feel he could be a defensive coordinator. If it's not going to work out with Dave Merritt, it's probably not going to work out anywhere. I would temper my expectations with Kaiir Elam. You mentioned it, Blair. If you go back to that in-house documentary that the Bills did on that particular draft, you could see that they were upset that the Chiefs traded ahead of them and got it right, really, in hindsight, with a 2-time All-Pro and Trent McDuffie signed a lucrative deal with the Los Angeles Rams. Buffalo goes on to take Kaiir Elam. Doesn't work out. He's outplayed by a 6th-rounder, Christian Benford. ends up getting traded to the Dallas Cowboys. Blair, that defense last year was not good. Really couldn't click with the Cowboys with the defense that was underwhelming. Moves on to the Tennessee Titans, and now he was free. And, this is, I think, Elam's last chance really to stick in the NFL. So he should be ultra motivated. And really, I think it's a Chiefs team that needs numbers at the position. We mentioned McDuffie now, member of the Rams. Jalen Watson joined him. Those were your top two cornerbacks last year. The two cornerbacks that are sitting that are due to be the starters are Christian Fulton and Noah Williams. If you combine their snaps on the field last year, defensive snaps, they're about 300 shy of what Jalen Watson did on his own. So the Chiefs need to still find their starters. I remember now in today's NFL, really it's three starters instead of two. I know that everyone considers the base, but mostly lining up in nickel nowadays. So you need three cornerbacks. So there's a lot of positions up for grabs. We've mentioned it and we've done it in our mocks. We've put multiple cornerbacks going to the Chiefs. So I think Elam and some of the other minor moves that the Chiefs have done is just the start of them throwing a lot of numbers at the position. And this will be a grand tryout of sorts in St. Joe, and probably one of the more fascinating positions to watch in St. Joe. And we'll see if they can end up with 5-6 guys that they feel good about.
Yeah, I think that we'll see, as we did in 2022, multiple defensive backs selected in this draft. Funny thing about that 2022 draft, great draft for the Chiefs, right? 10 players and 5 defensive backs taken. The only player remaining from the 2022 draft for the Chiefs is George Karlaftis. Everyone else is gone. That was quite a draft, and they all made a lot of, not all of them, but most of them went on and made a lot of money elsewhere.
Yeah, that can be a bad and a good sign in a sense, because you have to replace all those players now. As you mentioned, a lot of them did get paydays, and now you have to turn inward and really, I think, hit the draft room and your draft prep and do it again. We talk about what the Chiefs are going to be in 2026. I've been calling it, in my opinion, a two-year, almost not even a rebuild, but a retooling. And this draft is going to be a big part of it. These next two drafts are very important for really, I think, what's going to be almost a third iteration of Patrick Mahomes. Because it felt like the Legion of Zoom was one. You moved on from Tyreek Hill, had a different identity where, I think even for a few years, it felt like the defense was better than the offense for a handful. And now in this third iteration, I think you're going to look toward the draft and some of these free agency signings and say, all right, we did it with offense once. Then we kind of did it with defense. The offense was still really humming, but the defense was a little bit better. And now let's get to the more balanced iteration of the Chiefs. And I think Ken Walker is a big part of that. And I think whatever the Chiefs do in the draft is going to be a big part of that as well.
That's a great point. I love that. Pete Sweeney, always great talking to you. We'll do it again soon. Matt Besler played at Blue Valley West and Notre Dame before joining Sporting KC, where he was named MLS Defender of the Year in 2012. He was selected along with Sporting teammate Graham Zusi to the 2014 World Cup team that reached the knockout round in Brazil, and he'll be a Kansas City ambassador when the World Cup arrives here in June. Besler sat down with me and star columnists Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian. You'll hear their questions as well. And we started by asking him about his experience in a base camp, since Kansas City will be the World Cup home to Argentina, England, and the Netherlands, with Algeria in Lawrence this summer.
Base Camp 101, the majority of your World Cup experience as a player is in your base camp city. I know you may understand that, but you base camp in a city, and that's where you're spending the majority of your time. You're practicing out of that city, you're eating your meals, you're staying at the hotel, and then you go play your game. You leave the day before the game, you fly, you play your game. Right after the game, you get back on the plane and you fly back to your base camp for another 5 or 6 days and prepare for game 2. And so, if you're spending 40 days at the World Cup, I would say 30 of those days are in your base camp city. So base camps are really important. That's why so much like research went into these countries of like, where should we base camp and what's going to give us the best advantage? And really cool that so many countries looked at Kansas City as being at the top of the list. It says a lot about our city and what we have to offer. In terms of like my daily experience, every World Cup is different. Like it takes on a life of its own with the culture and the country. My experience in Brazil, we didn't get out a lot. And part of that was we were Americans in Sao Paulo. It wasn't safe. So unfortunately, we didn't get to do a lot of exploring on our own. We would have days off. Days off are important when you're playing a long tournament. So on the days off or on the mornings off, there will be some opportunities for the player to get out, because you got to get out of the hotel. But that's going to be handled like on a team by team basis, you know, in terms of like, do I think Messi is going to be walking around Kansas City? No. I mean, it'd be cool if he was. So that's like from the player side. I mean, you're kind of in a bubble, security reasons. But from the fans' perspective, I think that's where like the real opportunity is to like get a sense of a country's culture. The fans follow the teams around for the entire month. That's what they do. They stay in the base camps and they'll travel to Dallas for the game and they'll come back to Kansas City, and then they'll travel to wherever the next game, they'll come back to Kansas City. That's how so I think the fans are going to be spending a lot of time in Kansas City too. And obviously they're going to be looking for stuff to do, and they're going to be free to check out what we have to offer as a city.
Could you feel that as a player? Even though you were more sequestered in your hotel, could you feel the fan support following you guys around as a team?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So there was a couple different groups. There's like the family group. And so we had like the player hotel, we had a family hotel where all of our family was, and they were within walking distance. And that felt safe, where you could just go out and walk and like say hi to your family. And then I think there was a couple like other like hotels where US fans could like rent out. But yeah, like everywhere we went in Brazil, I mean, Americans, like they love to show they're from America, like USA flags. And like, so when you see that, that was a cool experience for me, because I've always seen it from like I haven't spent a ton of time outside of the US, but like when you see somebody from a different country and like they see someone else from their country, or like somebody from, I don't know, Honduras, and they see a Honduran flag in Kansas City, like how cool of a moment that is. And I never really understood that until I played in the World Cup at Brazil. Like when you do see your flag in like a different country and someone else that's there, that's one of your own, it's amazing. Like you feel that instant connection of like, oh wow, I'm not alone. Like they're here with me. If that makes sense.
It's funny, Matt, you expressed that you were kind of in a silo in a way there, but you obviously had some feel for the world around you when you were down there. And I wonder how much that allows you to have some vision of what this will feel like in Kansas City, or is it almost a blind spot for you since you didn't get out to see that much?
Yeah, in some ways, I don't know what's going to happen. Yes, I got to play in a World Cup, but I've never experienced a World Cup. None of us have in Kansas City. So like, every World Cup's different. So no one has any idea exactly what it's going to be like. But I think that's one of the exciting parts. There's this mystery about what is it going to be like. We can't predict it. I can tell you that Kansas City's ready. It may not feel like it, and it won't feel, I think there's going to be this like scramble feeling getting ready. But the vibe that I get and what I've seen compared to other cities, Kansas City is by far the leader, and we are way ahead of all the other cities.
What do you think made it this way? What contributed to Kansas City
being ahead?
Yeah, being ahead and being the type of place that was going to attract for base camps.
Yeah,
and even get World Cup games in the first place. Be one of the smallest U.S. city to land games. What is it about this town and its soccer culture?
Mm-hmm. I mean, purely from a competitive standpoint, this is what the countries look at. They look at centrally located. The World Cup's a grind. You're going to play potentially 8 games or 7 or 8 games if you win. And so you're traveling, all of that travel adds up, different time zones. If you're base camped in New York City and you play your games on the West Coast, like, it's not ideal. So centrally located, I think ease of transportation and ease of living, that was one of the biggest headaches in Sao Paulo. It's such a massive city and the traffic is insane. It affected us. Like, it affected our experience. I mean, we had to get, every single day we got on a bus and drove to the Sao Paulo training center, and it took us an hour and a half. Like,
These guys are laughing because they can relate, having been in Sao Paulo.
For the Chiefs game this year, last season, it took us whatever it was, Sam, 3 hours to get to
3 hours and 20 minutes to go 15 miles on.
yeah. So that's you do that every day for 30 days,
Yeah.
and it gets pretty old.
Something that's going to happen here is a lot of these players have no idea what to expect from Kansas City. And you could probably relate to the just players coming into sporty Kansas City and not really knowing. And obviously they had agreed to come to Kansas City, right? They'd agreed to sign there or whatever. But did you feel like Kansas City surprised some people who you played with, just other professional soccer players who maybe had a different impression than what the reality of the city was?
It's one of my favorite feelings and memories that I have at playing, is getting to see somebody else that has no idea where Kansas City is. They don't think they're going to like it, and just watching it all unfold. And I could give you countless examples. It was like clockwork. Watching somebody come in and they're surprised by this, and they're surprised by, wait, I can buy a house for this much? Like, whoa, okay, I'm living in a mansion here. Like, and it was fun for me just being from Kansas City. I got to take like a step back and just watch it all unfold. But by the end of their experience, whether it was like 3 months in or 6 months in or a year, every single person's like, I love Kansas City. I didn't think I'd like this, but this is where my heart's at, and I think I could settle down here. And it says a lot. It's really hard to explain, but there's got to be something true about Kansas City because it happens time and time again.
Do you anticipate that sort of feeling coming out of the World Cup, albeit probably not really with players so much since they probably won't be out, but just you think the fan experience here for visitors will be a little bit like that? Some sense of surprise here?
Yeah, I would say that there's going to be, I don't know the percentage, a lot of people that are going to be visiting Kansas City that probably would never visit Kansas City in their life. So it's a great opportunity for us to showcase kind of what we're about. But I also think too, like, actually from the soccer standpoint, it's a good recruiting tactic for Major League Soccer, but also Sporting Kansas City. There's going to be world-class players that are in our city playing at our facilities. There's going to be people playing that aren't base camped here. So making a good impression for them goes a long way. And it's not just their team. So what happens is do I think Sporting's going to sign, anybody from Argentina after the World Cup? Probably not.
Break some news.
Yeah, maybe. But what happens is all 30 of those players from Argentina go back after the World Cup, and they go back to their clubs, and everybody is like, how was the World Cup? How was base camp? How was Kansas City? Oh, you're not going to believe Compass Minerals Training Center. Like, it's crazy. It's the nicest place ever. Like, Kansas City, that's the place to be, blah, blah, blah. And then it just spreads and spreads and spreads. And then when the player actually, whatever player you find, you do get on the phone with them and they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of Kansas City. I had a teammate from the World Cup who talked about it. Like, I'll give it a chance.
Here's what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. The Masters, a tradition unlike any others, so says CBS, is this week, and a local product to watch is Gary Woodland. The Topeka native and KU grad has had his moments in the sun, and he's easy to pull for. Woodland was the 2019 U.S. Open champ, and he's won 5 times on the PGA Tour. In 2023, Woodland was diagnosed with a brain tumor and underwent surgery. Earlier this year, Woodland announced he was dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. He continued to compete, and last month he won his 5th career PGA event, the Houston Open. Good luck to Gary this week in Augusta. That'll do it for this episode. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC staff of Gabriella Lacey, Irvin Zhang, and Suzanne Hogan, and to our editors Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.